We tend to think of history as, well, pretty straightforward, don't we? Like a collection of facts, dates, events, just what happened.
Yeah, a clear story. But if you actually step back and look closer, there's this whole incredibly complex landscape underneath. Theories, really fundamental questions about the whole discipline.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. Welcome to the deep dive. We take source materials, like the ones we have here, and we try to pull out the essential knowledge you need.
That's right. Today, it's the philosophy of history.
Mm.
We're exploring the theoretical foundations, how we even think about the past.
Our sources really dig into some deep stuff, like how do we even define history as an academic thing? How is it studied? And maybe the biggest question, how much can we really know about what happened way back when?
hmm And our mission, if you like, for you listening, is to give you a solid handle on these big scholarly debates. Sort of foundation so you can engage with history, critically.
Think of it as a shortcut, maybe, through some pretty dense academic discussions.
Definitely. Because let's be honest, a lot of people prefer the doing of history, the digging in archives, the storytelling, which is great, absolutely vital work.
Sure, the practice. But our sources really stress that this theoretical spade work, thinking about the why and how, it's just as crucial. And honestly, quite fascinating when you get into it.
It really is. So maybe the best place to start is with that seemingly simple question. What is history?
Right. Sounds easy, but the source material immediately tells us it's way more nuanced.
Well, the first thing is that academics usually agree on two core parts. First, you've got the actual stuff that happened, the past events themselves. Objective reality, you might say.
Okay, the events. What's the second part?
The second is what we call historiography. That's the records of those events and, crucially, the interpretations people make of them.
Historiography. Okay, the source mentions the Greek roots, historia and graphe.
Exactly. History and writing, basically.
Sure.
So historiography is about the practical side. The research methods historians use, the tools, the rules they follow when they investigate the past.
Got it. And we'll dig more into those methods later based on these sources.
We will. But even before we get to the how, the philosophy of history makes us ask about the what and, like you said, the can we even know part.
Right. Our sources bring up these critiques, questions about how much knowledge we can actually get, especially from, the really distant past.
And these aren't just abstract thought experiments. They have real implications for how research is done. The source mentions, for example, how certain critiques affect research into religious history, though it doesn't go into the specifics of that event. It's more about the general principle.
It mentions historical forms of postmodernism as one place these radical critiques come from, raising doubts about accessing the past.
Yes, that's one area. And these methodological doubts, they keep coming up in the material we're looking at. But, okay, sticking with the basics for now.
Yeah.
We have a sense of what history is, events, plus their recording and interpretation. What are some of the big theoretical questions philosophers of history wrestle with?
Our source lays out quite a few. They grapple with the underlying theory of history itself as a discipline. Like, what is the theory? Do we use existing ones?
And they think about potential frameworks for understanding the whole sweep of history. Could it be secular, maybe religious? Are there patterns?
Ah, yeah, the patterns question. Is history cyclical? Does it move in a straight line progress, maybe, or decline? Or is it just random, haphazard?
That classic question. Does history repeat itself?
Hmm.
It sounds simple, but how you answer that changes everything, doesn't it?
Absolutely. If it repeats, maybe we can predict things or learn direct lessons. If it's all unique, well, that's different.
And related to that, is history predetermined? Are there big forces pushing things along, or is it all down to, free choices people make?
Which then leads to asking if scientific laws apply to people. Can you have laws for human conduct like you do for physics?
Exactly. Is history a hard science? A soft science? Or something else entirely? Does it have objective checks and balances, or is it more interpretive?
And then there are all the different theories about specific past events and trends, plus the whole debate about lessons, ethical, political, religious. Should we even try to learn lessons from history?
But maybe the most fundamental question, the one that sort of underpins all the others, can we even know the past? Can we ascertain it?
Or is it just, subjective, an art form, something easily manipulated? These are huge questions.
Huge. And thinkers have been wrestling with them for a long, long time. Our source points out a really interesting shift in how the philosophy of history itself has been approached over time.
Right. Tell us about that shift.
Well, until about a century ago, the main approach was what the source calls speculative philosophy of history.
Speculative, what does that mean?
It means the focus was on creating these really big, sweeping theories, grand narratives, trying to explain the overall purpose or meaning of all of history.
Ah, okay. Trying to find the big picture, the unifying themes, the driving forces behind everything.
Precisely. The source gives some great examples. You've got Augustine, seeing history centered around the cross of Christ.
Okay, a religious framework.
Then someone like Comte, emphasizing scientific progress, moving beyond religion and metaphysics.
A secular, progress-based view.
And of course, Marx, interpreting everything through economics and class struggle.
Right, another huge all-encompassing theory. So these were attempts at a unified vision.
Very much so. It kind of fit the intellectual mood of earlier times, maybe, a desire for unified systems. But over the last century or so, the focus has shifted dramatically.
Shifted to what?
To what the source calls the critical outlook.
Yeah.
Instead of building grand theories, the focus is now much more on, well, posing, debating, and trying to answer those theoretical questions we just listed.
The ones about knowability, patterns, subjectivity.
Exactly. The speculative approach is often seen now as maybe a bit old-fashioned, perhaps even naive.
Why the change, though? What happened?
Several things, according to the source. The rise of historicism, the idea that you have to understand things in their specific context, made universal theories less convincing.
Makes sense. Context matters.
Plus, there was a growing emphasis on empirical, scientific study looking at the evidence. Meyerhoff is mentioned here. And as Rusin points out, just a general skepticism towards those great narratives.
And maybe academic specialization played a role. Everyone focusing on their little piece makes it harder to build a theory of everything.
That too. The source points out that tension. How can you search for these grand unifying ideas when the very possibility of knowing the historical facts at all is a major point of debate?
Yeah, it's like trying to build the roof before you're sure about the foundations.
A perfect analogy. And that brings us right to another really critical point from our source, subjectivity in historical interpretation.
Yes. The idea that events don't just speak for themselves.
Exactly. They don't carry their own meaning inherently. You need context to understand the full significance of anything that happened. The source is pretty emphatic. There's no such thing as a brute fact event that just tells you what it means all by itself.
So interpretation is always involved.
Always. And this isn't some fringe idea. The source says there's almost universal agreement in the scholarly world about this. Our worldview, our background, inevitably shapes how we see the evidence. Davis, Paget, Tabor, they all echo this.
Davis says there's no raw, uninterpreted evidence.
Right. And Tabor's quote is quite striking. It is impossible to gaze upon facts without interpretation. We all come with criteria, predisposed interests, cultural assumptions, whether we recognize them or not.
So these subjective factors, they're unavoidable when history gets written down. What kind of factors are we talking about?
The source defines them as like angles, biases, perspectives that we bring to the event from the outside. The analogy used is wearing colored glasses. The tint shapes what you see.
Okay.
It ranges. It could be relatively minor, like a historian choosing what details to include or leave out, maybe based on what they find interesting. Or it could be more obviously problematic.
Like
a political journalist covering their own party. Or a judge ruling on a case where they have a personal stake. Or a historian who just really despises the person they're writing about. Even a biased umpire in a game.
those are clear conflicts. The source mentions W.H. Walsh identifying specific areas where this happens.
Yeah, Walsh points to 4 things. Private preferences, group prejudices, biases against certain groups, different basic understandings of how history works, and underlying philosophical ideas or worldviews.
It seems like subjectivity is just baked into the process then. Is there any hope for getting at historical truth?
Well, that's the interesting part. Scholars like Walsh, and also Wands and Barnett, according to our source, they acknowledge subjectivity is everywhere, but they don't think it makes history impossible.
So what's the solution?
It's about awareness and methodology. Expect subjectivity, look for it, account for it. Wand talks about being cautious, detecting bias. Barnett says, look, nobody's free from attitudes and prejudice, historians included. It's about acknowledging it.
So not pretending to be perfectly objective, but managing the subjectivity.
Exactly. Baucham's quote sums it up nicely. History is an inextricable combination of fact and interpretation. And Tabor reminds us it's not just about facts, it involves imagination, engaging the heart as well as the head.
And our overall worldview plays a huge role.
A massive role.
Mhm.
The source makes the point that if historical facts clash hard with someone's core beliefs or desires, those facts often get ignored or twisted, no matter how strong the evidence is. It's a powerful bias.
This isn't a new problem, though, is it? Recognizing bias. The source uses the Roman historian Tacitus as an example.
Right. Tacitus is interesting because he wrote relatively close in time to the events around Jesus and early Christianity.
Okay, proximity. But he had biases.
Oh, yes. He's known for a strong aristocratic bias, and he firmly believed history should teach moral lessons, which, as we said, is subjective itself.
And he wasn't always accurate.
No. The source points out inaccuracies attributing speeches, getting battle details wrong. Moses Hattus apparently said Tacitus's interpretations must often be challenged because his viewpoint was so strongly colored.
But Hattus also called Tacitus Rome's greatest historian. How does that work?
It's a paradox, right? Hattus's explanation seems to be that while Tacitus definitely embellished and had his biases, he wasn't consciously lying or sacrificing what he saw as the truth. He was working within the norms of his time and his own worldview.
So even with flaws, his work has value if we read it critically.
That's the idea. We acknowledge the bias, the inaccuracies, but we don't just throw it out. We try to understand the lens he used.
And there are other ancient examples. Herodotus mixing in legends, Livy allowing for omens.
Exactly. Plus, the huge time gaps between events and when Livy and Tacitus wrote about them naturally led to inconsistencies.
Yet, historians today still reconstruct ancient history using these sources.
They do. They make allowances for the subjectivity, the bias, even the wrong data. The goal isn't perfect certainty, but to figure out the most probable historical core, despite all the challenges.
Which brings us back to the listener. It means you can approach historical accounts critically, spot potential biases, but still try to understand the events behind them.
Precisely. And this leads directly to the second big principle our source emphasizes. Historical knowledge is probabilistic.
Meaning it can't reach absolute certainty.
Correct. It operates in the realm of probability. This might feel a bit strange because we often think of history as solid facts.
So why probabilistic?
The source draws a parallel with science, both hard and social sciences. Anytime you're dealing with empirical evidence, evidence from observation, you're using inductive reasoning. And induction gives you probabilities, not certainties.
Whether it's physics, psychology, or history,
Yeah.
if it's based on evidence, the conclusion is about likelihood.
That's the core idea. Historians understand this. Their conclusions have to be framed probabilistically. David Hackett Fisher calls probability a key rule. All inferences from empirical evidence are probabilistic.
And others agree. Wand, Barnett.
Yes. Wand says we can't be as positive as people once thought. We judge based on what's most likely given the evidence. Barnett notes this is especially true for ancient history, but adds that enough data can still make a claim highly probable, highly evidential.
So using historical methods to arrive at probable arguments is just standard practice now.
It's required and assumed, yes. The source even notes agreement on this among New Testament scholars, including skeptical ones. It quotes Dunn saying, historical methodology can only produce probabilities.
Dunn elaborates on that.
Yeah, he talks about carefully graded judgments ranging from highly probable down to just possible. A probable finding in history is actually considered a strong result.
And this connects to historical revision, new evidence changing things.
Absolutely. Johnson and Tabor are mentioned regarding revision based on new evidence. It requires humility, being open to changing your mind. And Allison makes the point that proof is often impossible because you can almost always imagine an alternative explanation. It reinforces the probabilistic nature.
Okay, so it's probabilistic. Does that mean everything is just up in the air? That we can't really be sure about anything in the past?
No, definitely not. The source is careful to make that distinction. Just because it's probabilistic doesn't mean it's all guesswork or equally doubtful. There's the concept of practical certainty.
Practical certainty. For what kind of findings?
For things that are extremely likely, maybe even virtually certain, based on a lot of careful research over time, with no serious counter-evidence and having survived intense critical review.
So even if there's a tiny theoretical chance of being wrong someday, we can still be practically certain now based on overwhelming probability.
Exactly. We don't throw out all our knowledge just because of remote possibilities. The source uses everyday examples to make this clear.
Right. Taking medicine, that will probably work. Avoiding recalled food, even if the risk to you is small. Investing money based on likely outcomes.
Seeking shelter in a tornado, warning the event is likely or possible, even if not certain for your house. Just driving a car involves probabilistic risk assessment. Our lives are full of it.
Wise choices are based on the best available data and probability, not just whims. Dunn says probability is integral to daily living.
Right. Now, of course, new data or really plausible alternative hypothesis might mean we have to reopen an investigation. But that doesn't stop us from considering things like Caesar's assassination, Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, or Lincoln's election as practically certain.
Because the probability is incredibly high based on vast evidence.
Overwhelmingly high. So the historian's job is find the best data, apply critical standards, figure out the most probable outcome, but always stay open to new evidence or challenges.
Okay, so summing up where we are. History involves past events and their recording interpretation. It's influenced by subjective factors, and its knowledge is probabilistic, aiming for the most likely account.
That captures it well. And this whole question of how we know the past, this has been debated fiercely. The source highlights the period from about 1860 to 1960 as really crucial for these debates.
A century of intense discussion. Who are the key players? It mentions Leopold von Ranke first.
Yes, Ranker. He championed a meticulous positivist method. His goal was famously to show history as it actually occurred, wie es eigentlich gewesen ist, objectively.
He thought rigorous method could eliminate bias, like in the hard sciences.
That was the belief, that you could get to the objective facts. And others like Comte, Marx, Buckle also saw history as a kind of science with universal laws that could be uncovered. Scientific unpacking would reveal the past precisely, free of subjectivity.
The scientific history ideal. But that didn't hold unchallenged.
Not at all. By the late 1800s, a more relativistic trend emerged, linked to idealist philosophy Kant. Hegel had laid some groundwork.
How did idealism differ?
Well, someone like Wilhelm Dilthey started separating historical methods from natural science methods. He still thought you could get objective data, but emphasized lively visualization and reliving the past as key to understanding. The focus started shifting more to the historian's subjective role.
More emphasis on the interpreter.
Yes, and then you get more radical idealists like Crotius and Collingwood. They argue that all history is basically contemporary thought, the historian rethinking past thoughts in their own mind. Collingwood's quote about reenactment is powerful.
Wow, that's a huge difference from Ranke's objective facts. Positivists focusing on discovery, idealists on interpretation and the historian's mind. How did this play out in the U.S.?
Initially, many American historians were pretty confident about scientific history. But figures like Carl Becker and Charles Beard started raising serious questions about objectivity.
What did they argue?
Becker said, "We don't have the facts themselves, only interpretations of facts." Beard agreed, arguing that the researcher's subjectivity creates a crisis for Ranke's neutral history ideal.
But this relativistic view faced pushback later, mid-20th century.
It did. After World War II, there was a move back towards more traditional approaches, maybe a renewed concern about losing objectivity altogether. Peter Novick notes that relativism came under attack, and even supporters of Becker and Beard became hesitant, maybe worried about the morale of historians if everything was just relative.
So a real back and forth. Where did it land? Was there a synthesis between these realist, positivist, and idealist views?
Our source suggests there was, by the mid-20th century, a significant synthesis occurred. On one hand, most historians kept doing research, trying to find probable knowledge about the past. That's a win for the realists, the idea that there is something knowable out there.
But the idealists made their mark too.
Absolutely. They succeeded in making the point about subjective factors unavoidable. It became widely accepted that pure objectivity was impossible.
So the synthesis was what? Acknowledging bias but still believing we can find probable data.
Pretty much. Novick called it a convergence. The dominant view became that yes, actual historical data exists and we can research it, a realist victory on their core point, but we have to acknowledge the limitations. Even idealists like Becker didn't really doubt that something happened. No one doubts it, he's quoted. His point was more that the fact is nothing means nothing by itself. It needs interpretation.
So the idealists also won by establishing that historical knowledge is, as the source puts it, a chastened brand, limited by probability and bias.
Exactly. It's not the absolute certainty Ranke might have hoped for, nor is it pure subjective invention. It's something in between, grounded in evidence but shaped by interpretation and probability. And the questions raised by this whole debate are still relevant today.
This has been incredibly clarifying. We've gone from history seeming simple to seeing its complex definition, the mix of event and interpretation, the inescapable role of subjectivity, and this crucial idea of probability. Understanding this background really is vital for reading history critically, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It changes how you approach any historical claim. Which leads to a final thought, perhaps, for you listening.
Go on.
Given what we've discussed, the subjectivity, the probabilities involved in knowing the past, how did this change the way you approach information or claims presented as facts in other parts of your life? Does understanding the limits of historical knowledge make you think differently about certainty elsewhere?
That's a really interesting question to reflect on, the implications beyond just history. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the philosophy of history. We hope it's giving you a richer appreciation for the challenges and rewards of understanding our past.